We're talking with Ken Dryden, the author of the game, and obviously the legendary goaltender. And this was on the passing of his agent. How did you and Art meet?
We met at Cornell. He was a year ahead, and he, he had become this great college hockey fan, and players and fans don't necessarily, have become close, and sometimes players are a bit disparaging of super fans. But Art was, he was just so interesting. He was involved in student government. He was a terrific student. He knew sports. He was just involved in everything. And so then when he went to Yale Law School he was in the same class as Bill Clinton and Hillary Rodham. And then when he started with a law firm in New York, I became his first sports client. And so then, at one point he had almost 50% of the players in the National Hockey League as clients. Then when I left, I worked the 1980 Olympics for ABC. He negotiated my contract there, and then eventually he moved into the representation of announcers and technical people. So Al Michaels was one of his clients, Al Troutwick, Dan Deerdorf, Rick Riley, just all kinds of people. And but again, he just loved it. He loved the action of it.
Unbelievable. We're talking with Ken Dryden and about the game, but also on the passing, the sudden passing, and very sudden to me, maybe not so much to Ken, but I spoke to someone, a mutual friend we had in Manhasset recently, who said, yes, he had just found out, and he said Art was very quiet about it, didn't like to make a fuss about it, didn't like to talk about it, and obviously didn't, and remained active, which probably threw people off. He was very active in the community and was around a lot, so people didn't really realize, I guess, that he was as ill as he was, which I clearly did not. And to his family, we send our condolences. The book, the 30th anniversary of this very special book, which is considered really from an athlete standpoint or from a professional stars standpoint the best book of its kind, and has been that. When you wrote this book, I know you could never imagine to get the amount of praise and the reviews that you've gotten and the amount of acclaim this book. But when you sat down to read this book, what was your mission at the time? What were you trying to provide?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I grew up with sports books. I loved sports books. And during the time that I was playing with Montreal in the 1970s, I would continue to read sports books, and two of my favorites, three of them were really written during that decade. Bill Bradley's Life on the Run. Right. Bill Russell's book that he wrote with Taylor Branch called Second Wind, and the book that David Halberstam wrote about, I think it was the breaks of the game, maybe. Yes. It was about the Portland Trailblazers. Yep. And but of course, when you're reading somebody else's take on their own experiences, you also read where, that's not quite how I, felt it or experienced it or what I would think about it. And so I had thought that when I stopped playing that I'd like my chance, but I wanted to write it myself. I didn't want a ghostwriter. And really the Bill Russell book written with Taylor Branch, who's a terrific writer, you could just tell a little bit of how, in fact, there were parts that didn't read quite as authentic as other parts, that they were kind of told through the filter of somebody who hadn't been on the court. So I didn't know whether I could write it or not, but I wanted to give it a try. And what I was hoping that the book would be was not just kind of that, behind-the-scenes look that nobody else would ever get, and what a dressing room would, and on the ice in difficult moments would be like for players that people would otherwise never know so closely. But I thought that really that the sports life wasn't all that much different from other lives that I had led. And it's still all about people. It's still about groups. It's still about having goals, having dreams, making them work, not making them work. What makes somebody special? What makes a group work? And not just with those that have special skills, but the mix of skills that you have. How you deal with expectations, how you deal with an audience and fans, and that if I got the life of it right, then those who were not sports fans, who thought they were stupid about sports, would be able to read it and go, that's not much different than what I've felt doing this, or worried about doing that, or whatever. And I think that that's, in the end, what made it all work, is that it became a crossover book and not just a sports book.
And a brilliantly written book. And the title's important, which clearly is a very meaningful one, and just the very simple, the game, but what the game means to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it came from an interview, or no, actually it wasn't an interview, it was a conversation I had with a former great Canadiens player named Dickie Moore.
Yep.
And he kept just saying, about the game, and I'm, this part of the game. And by the end of the conversation, I realized that, the game is not hockey or football or baseball. It's the full life of it. I mean, it's every aspect of it, and beginning when you're, quite young, and going through all the different stages of it. It's really a full life as long as you live it. And so I knew from the moment of that phone call that if I was ever going to write a book, that's what the title would be.